Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Scufidio, editor of Prevue, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. I'm thrilled to welcome a colleague and friend, Sharon Fisher, CEO and Chief Idea Sparker at Play with a Purpose. Sharon's company's mission is to abolish the old-fashioned learning of the speaker at the front of the room with slides. We all know what that's like, and replace it with learning driven by the participants actually doing. Weaving purposeful play-based events and learning strategies throughout your conference will significantly increase engagement and retention and give you a much better ROI. And we probably all experience that to be true. Now the key is Sharon is going to teach us how. Today's session will be recorded and you will receive a link via email, so don't worry if you are distracted and miss something. And as with all Prevue webinars, you will also receive CEUs for your participation. Speaking of participation, please do jump in and ask questions or make comments in your question box. We hope to integrate them into the presentation, and we will hold a Q&A at the end. So on that note, I'm going to pass everything over to Sharon. Welcome, Sharon.
Hey, thanks, Barbara. I'm really excited to be here today. It's been a little while since we've been together, so this is going to be fun. So welcome, everybody. Like I said, I'm thrilled to be here. And for those of you that have been in my sessions before, either live or sometimes on Zoom or in some of the other platforms, we've had a lot of hands-on and a lot of interaction and conversation and chat. And today we're not going to be doing that because the platform doesn't allow for it. So we're going to do some different kinds of things, and you're going to do some at your desk activities while we're kind of walking through and while we're playing. But our topic for today is undividing the great divide and actually blending learning and content together. And up until today, the majority of all of our meetings have been about content over here and interaction and networking and engagement over here. And even before COVID, when we started talking about we've got to get people more engaged, we've got to get them to put their phones down, we've got to get people more involved, our strategy was always, let's continue to focus on the outside the classroom piece, right? So it was all about figuring out how to make our networking functions better, how to add more recreation, how to maybe add some team building, how to bring people together in those ways. And so today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about some ways to actually move the engagement, move the interaction, move the networking out of the part where we traditionally always put it, and think about how do we make our learning really more engaging and how do we bring that alive for people. So I'm going to, I'm going to invite you to the No Pants party. And we're still going to be no pants today because we haven't gone live yet. So we're going to stay there. And then if you'd like, if you have any questions, I love questions in the middle rather than waiting till the end. So Barbara's going to moderate for me. She's going to keep an eye on the Q&A and see if anybody has questions. I don't want you to wait till the end because you either forget or it becomes irrelevant or whatever. And I kind of like to go the way the audience wants to go. So feel free to submit your questions anytime you want. And Barbara, feel free to interrupt me anytime we have questions. And we can move on from there. So our first thing that I'd love for you to do is I'd like you to close your eyes. And I know that always seems weird when people ask you to close your eyes, but what I want you to picture in your mind is the last time you've been around a campfire, or it could be around a grill stove, or it could be around your little portable stove that you have in your backyard, or it could be at a blazing campfire at a campground, or it could even be in your sitting around your fireplace in -13-degree winter with no power and you're sitting in your fireplace. And I want you to think about cooking s'mores are the favorite things for campfire and the 3 ingredients that really go into those s'mores. So I want you to think about graham crackers, the crunchy, salty, sweet, feeling of those graham crackers. I want you to think about the chocolate that, oh, it's so good to just eat it right out of the pack and not even put it into the thing. But I want you to think about putting that on top of the graham crackers and now toasting the marshmallow and sticking your stick in. And if you're like me, I like mine brown and crispy, but not burned. So I don't want it to catch on fire. I just want it to be nice and toasty and warm and melted all the way through. My sister doesn't even want hers melted. She just wants to like wave it over the fire and then stick it right on the s'more because she likes hers hard and chewy, like right out of the package. So think about how you like it. Think about putting that s'more together and think about the yummy gooiness in your mouth and the taste of that. So I hope everybody has a vision of that. It conjured a good memory for you. You've got got that thing. Now go ahead and open up your eyes. And what we're going to talk about, the reason I love s'mores as an example is what we're going to talk about today is blending 3 different things that distinctly and on their own are all good. They all have great qualities. They all have great great pieces to them, and they all have a need to fall into our meeting matrix in some place or other. And that is, of course, learning and networking. And because I'm the play girl, I think play has a vital role in that. So we're going to go ahead and put all 3 of those together, and we're going to make our own yummy morsel for the end of the conference or for the end of the webinar. We're going to talk about how do we do that in our conferences. So there's that yummy gooey s'more, the perfect little bite-sized one. So why are we talking about this now? And I think that there's a couple of reasons why this is really important right now. One, just like 2 years ago, we are in a critical point in planning meetings where we have the opportunity again to totally switch up how we do meetings. People are coming back to meetings and they are looking forward to being together, to networking, to hugging their friends if that's allowed at your meeting. I'm a hugger, so it is at all of mine. But they're looking forward to being back together again. And they have some expectations for some networking. They have some expectations to learn something. They have some expectations to maybe have a cocktail and to enjoy the property where they're staying or the shows or whatever might be in your vicinity. But other than that, they have really no preconceived notions on what a meeting in 2022 is going to look like, because we've been through 2.5 years almost or 2 exact years, and then some a little bit before that, but 2 exact years of doing things very differently. And because we're entering a new realm, we have the opportunity right now to do some experiments, to try some new things and to shake some things up. The other thing is, if you think about the best learning you've ever had. So I want everybody to kind of get that in their head and think about the time you went to your best ever learning experience, and what was that? When did you go and all of a sudden something like it hit you like a bolt of lightning, right? And you walked out of there going, oh my gosh, that was great. That was spectacular. My bet is for most of us, that didn't happen in a general session, right? I mean, we might have walked out going, wow, that was so motivational. I can't believe that the guy who had no legs could actually climb to the top of Mount Everest. It's inspirational, but something that you really took away, you put to use. It was really concrete for you, and it really had that really powerful effect of going, wow, I got that. I get it. I understand it, and I know how to apply it, and I know how I can use it the minute I walk out of here. And that is something you actually put into play when you went back. I'd love to share an example for you. So one for me is I go to this conference every year. It's called Mind Camp. It is my favorite conference of everything I go to in the whole entire year because it brings together people from the innovation and the creative industry. So there's educators and teachers, and I'm the only meetings person there. But there's people that do training, and there's people that do counseling, and there's all kinds of folks that are looking for innovative and creative new ways to do their jobs. If you ever want to go, it's in August, it's up in Canada, and it is and it's at a camp, so you're a lot of outside stuff, but it's a great conference. But when I was there one time, here's my aha bolt that kind of cemented everything for me in this whole, we have got to move to this hands-on learning piece. So I took a class called Foresight, and Foresight is like a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or one of those kind of programs where you learn more about your style and your personality and the way you approach different things. And Foresight is a tool to understand how your creative brain thinks. And in Foresight, there's 4 different styles of the way your brain thinks. So we sat through an hour class. We had taken the assessment before we came, so there wasn't a whole lot of hands-on there. And then we walked through all of those styles, and we all laughed, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, that's totally him! It is for real," you know. And so you could see the people around you that you knew kind of come to life through the profile, just like with DISC or Culture Index or any of the other tools that are out there right now. So, but in Foresight, what we did was after we went through that, they said, "Okay, we're going to take a break. We've been in the classroom from an entire hour. That's not mind camp. Like, we're going to take a break and we're going to go outside." So we went outside, and they divided us into 4 groups. And they divided us into 4 groups, but we didn't know what the groups were or why they were. And they handed us a stack of colored paper, kind of like the one you see here. And that stack, and they handed that to us, and they said, "Here's what we want you to do. We want you to," what was the exact, the thing it was, "your problem is to figure out what to do with this stack of paper. Be creative." And then they gave us 20 minutes. And so we sat there, and it was like, "Oh my gosh, what do we do with this stack of paper?" And it was really, really interesting because our group, mine was this paper ball group. Ours is, our profile is the ideator. So we're the big idea people, the out there people, the crazy people, the ones that always want to do something big, bold, different, unusual, you know, break the mold every chance we get. You know, no lines exist, so we can't color outside because there aren't any to begin with. So we created all these little paper balls, and there was a fence right where we were. So we stuck all these little balls in a fence, and we kind of made a mosaic in the fence. And then we came back together as a group, and one of the groups showed this picture of this sailboat on the side. And this particular group was done by the implementers. And the implementers are the folks that take great ideas and fine tune them and bring them to life, right? So they take the plan that everybody's spent all the time creating and coming up with, and they bring it to life. And so they thought, well, we've got to bring something concrete and beautiful and finite to life. You can see this very detailed boat. It's even got birds up in the top. It's got everything you could possibly want. So then he went over to a group that had a stack of papers, and this was the group called the clarifiers. And the clarifiers are the people that what I call do their homework. They're the why people. Why are we thinking about this? Why do we have a program? Who might we consult? And they think about all the things up front, and they hone in and fine tune what the problem is, and then they come back. So that's what they do. So they had a stack of paper that was separated in stacks by color. And we were like, "Well, why did you do that?" And they said, "Well, because we looked through the whole stack of paper, and we found one in the middle that had directions that said, stack all the papers in color, by color, in order to get them ready to put into the cabinet." And none of us had seen that piece of paper. None of us had actually looked for directions or for anything else that might done. But the clarifiers, because that's what they did, they had gone through the whole stack, found the directions, and done exactly what the directions said. So the point to this kind of long, drawn out story is really that the interactive piece, the experiential piece, the hands-on piece, the live doing of something that brought it to life for us is really what helps cement in our brains what each of those 4 different roles do. So we heard it, we listened to it in the classroom. We actually we had fun and we laughed and it was interesting because it was all about us, right? But it wasn't until we actually got our hands dirty, we actually went out and started doing things and putting it into play, that the real things came about. And at the end, we all laughed about our different approaches and what we did. And then we had a conversation too about how life could never work if our team was all four. And so how do we blend together and accept each other in different ways? So it was that hands-on experiential piece that really brought it alive for us and really made it come true. And that's where we need to get to with our learning. The PowerPoint at the front of the slide and the doing all of those kinds of things no longer works. So, just like Benjamin Franklin said 1 billion years ago, tell me and I forget, teach me, I remember, involve me in some way and I learn. So our goal is to get away from images like this picture where everybody is sitting and just doing things on their phone and find a way to get them actually participating and doing things in the classroom. So this is like one of my favorite made up quotes, and there's a James Michener quote that's similar, and I kind of bastardized it and made it my own, but I think it's really true. And it says, the master in the art of creating great events, live, hybrid, virtual, makes little distinction between learning and connecting, the classroom and the hallway, and playing, content and conversation. Their events leave it to the guests to decide if they are working, learning, playing. To the designer, they should always be doing both. So when we can combine all of those elements into one, we're going to have a much more impactful and a much more powerful learning experience. So what's it going to take for us to get there? So I'd like you to play along with me here for a minute. And some of you may have done this before because it's been around, but what I want you to do is just casually cross your hands, right? Whatever's comfortable for you, clasp your hands. And then what I want you to do is take note of which of your thumbs is on the top. Mine, I have my right thumb on the top. You might have yours the opposite and have your left thumb on the top, right? So the way you just put it together is the comfortable way of doing it. Now what I'd like you to do is take your hands apart and then pull them back together and do it the opposite way. So in live, when I can actually see you, I see people going, okay, I can't quite get this, and they're moving their fingers around so that they can get their hand in the right place. So I want you to hold it just like that for a minute and feel the uncomfortableness of doing something a little different than you usually do, and how it was a little maybe hard to get there, just a little awkward to get there, a little complicated. All right, now I want you to go back to the other way. That happens like instantaneously, no blinking. And again, separate your hands and go back to the opposite way. What I'm sure you can figure out already is that the second time you do it, and the third time you do it, and the fourth time you do it, it becomes much more comfortable and much easier. So what we're going to have to do is use that same kind of theory as we're moving down the road of blending content and networking and all of those things together and making learning experiential. It's going to be awkward at first. We're going to be a little uncomfortable. And for some of us, it might be really hard at the beginning, but eventually the more we do it, the easier it becomes. And so we want to take some risk and kind of flip up what we're doing and change things into a different way. So let's talk a little bit about how do we do it and how do we start getting there. So the first thing I'd like to share is, and I think we all know this, and I think in today's world, with meetings coming back so fast and furious and things being dumped on our plates so quickly, this is the part that really gets lost. And it really is all about understanding your purpose before you pick your platform. And that could be a virtual platform if you're still doing virtual and hybrid meetings, or it could be a live platform like a venue or a hotel or wherever you're going to have your meeting. You want to choose your space based on what your purpose is. Why are you having the meeting? What do you want to do? And I remember when this 20 years ago, I guess, I was chosen to be the chair for the MPI SEC, our Florida State Conference. And I had never sat on the meeting planner side of the fence. I've always sat on my fun side, and doing all the interactive things. And so I knew when I did that meeting that I wanted to flip it up. I knew I wanted to do more interactive things. I wanted to use they have a really cool wine bar at the hotel, and I wanted to do some interactive things there, and I wanted to use some outdoor space. Well, unfortunately, the contract for the space, or for the hotel, had been signed 3 years before I ever became chair. So I was really locked into, you have a foyer and you got some ballroom and some breakout space, and that's really all you can have. You can't use the restaurant, you can't use the wine bar. The outdoor space is for the leisure guests, and so it severely limited some of the really interesting and cool things I had in my head. And that said, that doesn't mean you can't use a ballroom or breakout and do some really interesting things, which we'll talk about. But if I had known I was going to be chair 3 years ago, I would have said, make sure I have in that contract that I want some unusual and creative spaces to do things. So it's really all about doing that. If you think about it, if you're a chef and you walk into the kitchen and you get out a frying pan and a ladle, and that's what you walk into your kitchen with, and you decide, oh, I want to bake a cake. Well, it's going to be really difficult with those two tools, right? So the goal is to think as far in advance as we can about what we want to do. And one way to do that, and I'll just share this really quick, it's called Learn, Feel, Do. It's a tool that we use to help walk our internal audiences, our clients, through what are the real key things that we want to make sure happens at this meeting. And this tool does a couple things. One, it helps us define what we want them to learn and what the content is that we need them to walk away with. How we want them to feel. Is this a meeting that's going to be really pep rally, motivate, go out there and sell? It's our national sales kickoff. Or is it going to be a meeting where we're having to tell people we're having layoffs? And so there's a whole different feeling around that meeting. How do we get there? And then what action do we want them to take? And that can be either at the meeting or it could be when they get back home. What do you want your results to be? And the way we use this tool is we give it to our clients and to the stakeholders of the meeting, and we say, please just spend 15 minutes and do this by yourself. And then we come together and then we talk about, okay, what does that look like? And what we find out is frequently there are conflicting ideas about what goes into the meeting, and we've never had a conversation about what that strategy is. So we're kind of all over the board. So this helps you get everybody on the same page. It also helps with allocating budgets. So if you say that your whole core purpose is doing one thing, and then somebody wants to spend money that doesn't fit into any of these pieces of it, then you can very easily say, I'm not sure how that fits in. We don't have it in the budget. So tell me how it fits and we'll see what we can do. But it gives you a tool to say, yeah, not in the budget, not doing that, not going there. So if anybody wants this, I'll put up my email at the end, and you can just shoot me an email and just say, learn, feel, do, and I'd be happy to send you this tool and a sample one that we have that will show you how it looked when we got it all filled out, so you can kind of get an idea what goes into those categories. So what we're really talking today about is the strategic active engagement of attendees in opportunities to learn through doing. So we're not learning through listening, we're not learning through reading, we're learning through doing something. And we're blending storytelling and innovation and brainstorming and games and all different kinds of conversational things where we can help people get where they want to go. It's really moving in a different direction from what we've done before. So let me ask you a question, and we'll see what kind of response we get. What is the difference between sex education and sex training? Which would you prefer your 12-year-old daughter to go to, a sex education class or a sex training class? Yeah. That's what, yeah. So I can hear some laughing going on, even though I know I can't. And I'm pretty sure most of you would say you want your 12-year-old to go to a sex education class. You just want her to understand the basics, but you don't want her to get any experience in learning how to do that, right? So the sex training program is really moving more into the hands-on, the doing. So our opportunities and our learning at our conferences needs to move a little bit out of the education role and into the training role. So we've got people doing that. So Barb, I'm going to take a breather right here and see if we have any questions or comments or anything anybody wanted to share.
And I have to say, Sharon, I've never quite heard that described in that way.
It brings it right alive, right? No, so can't you just, you think about the difference between educating someone and training somebody, and they're kind of two different things. And, it may not be politically correct, but I think that example brings it crystal clear in your mind what the differences are.
I think we have 100% engagement right now. So I have a great question from Jill.
Okay.
It's a practical question. How do you sell a more traditional leadership like engineering or finance on spending time on creativity? Is there research on ROI? So in other words, yeah, this sounds wonderful, and I can see certain kinds of groups embracing it. I think for others, it would be hard to get them to, or the leadership anyway, to see the value. Do you have anything you can add to that?
Yeah, and there is tons and tons and tons of research out there that looks at the neuroscience behind learning and how things click into your brain and when things click into your brain. Like, I'll give you an example, and this isn't about engineers, but I think it's a really fascinating example. There's a sleep researcher. His name's Dr. Maas, M-A-A-S, if any of you guys want to go get his book. He's a fascinating guy. But he was telling us in their research, they had people sleeping, and then they had electrodes hooked up to all different kinds of parts of their brain to see what was firing when, what was happening when, and to learn that. And what they found out was that everybody needs 8 hours of sleep, that in every hour of that 8 hours, something different is going on in your brain. So in the first hour, when you have really short REM sleep, it's all up front here in the frontal lobe, and the things are just firing away. And when you get to that 7th hour, then there's these noises that go psst, 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 and it's happening more in the back of your brain. So what they figured out from that was that during that 7th and 8th hour of sleep is when you get muscle memory. So he was working with, I think it was Chrissy Everett, who was a famous tennis player, and she was trying to perfect her forehand, right? So she spent all day, 8 hours a day, forehand, running, forehand. And then she'd go, she'd eat healthy, she'd do all the right nutritional things. She'd go to bed, and she only slept for between 6.5 and 7 hours of sleep at night. So he took her and he said, here's the deal. You've got to sleep for 8 hours. So we're going to have to get you on a routine of eating at the right times and get you on a routine so that you are actually sleeping 8 hours. And he said within a month of her sleeping 8 hours, she had perfected her forehand because everything she learned moved into her muscles. So our muscles have different kinds of memory. So that doesn't exactly answer your question, but there is all kinds of research out there, and there are different parts of our brain that help us learn and remember and perform different things based on how we learn it and things like nutrition and sleep and some of those. So I think the key with trying to work with an audience of, say, engineers, or I find lawyers and doctors kind of all fall in that same boat of, I don't want to have fun, just tell me what I need to know. I think that the key is to, one, start where you are. Don't start with an activity, and I'm just going to use that word. Let's start with an activity that is going to be so far out of the box that they're going to go, why are we doing this? I don't get it. I'm not participating. That's too extreme for me. So start small. Do something interesting, right? Do something that is non-threatening to them, and build in and start on a small scale. And then once you have some success with some of those smaller things, or even, and I say smaller, it might also be familiar, things that they already know about. So start with something they're familiar with and bring in some engagement and some interaction in that way, and then move up to something next. So I would never, like for instance, in the middle of a workshop, say, all right, what I want everybody to do now is stand up. I want you to do 5 jumping jacks. All right, everybody go, 5 jumping jacks, and then you sit back down, and people are like, why did we do that? That was ridiculous. That has nothing to do with anything, right? It just doesn't. It's not part of this course we're taking. So the other thing is to make it relevant to what they're doing, and make sure that you've got it. You've got something that is connected, right? It helps make what they're learning sticky or memorable, or it helps them play with the idea or apply the idea. So as far as and Jill, I'm not sure, so feel free to type in, and Barbara will grab me. I'm not sure if you were asking specifically how to get engineers to to think creatively or do a creative activity, or to brainstorm. But there's some tools that you can use to kind of lead them in, get them set up, and get them ready to go, so that they understand how it's going to help them and why it's going to help them, and it's comfortable for them to do. So I will have some more examples as we go through, but feel free to just shoot into Barbara if you have anything else that, around that you want to know. So, all right, I'm going to just move on a little bit here. Again, keep those questions coming. I'd love to answer them as we go. So, Jill, I do, just so you know, I do intend on coming back to how do you get your boss to say yes, right? So we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we get to the end. So our goal is to change them from being watchers and to make them be participants, is to get them immersed in the trivia and to get them immersed in what we're doing. And I think as we think about that, we have to think, well, why aren't we doing that now? Why aren't we doing it? And the common questions that I get the common answers that I get are things like, it's too expensive, we don't have a budget, or I don't know how to do that. Or in the case of a lot of companies, it's like, that's not part of my job. I'm on the logistics side of planning meetings, and somebody else is doing the content. So it's not a part of my job, even though I might like it to be. It's not where I am at this point in time. So it's really about thinking about why aren't we doing it, and then thinking about, are there some ways we can overcome that? It's really, really critical that we start thinking about it now for two really, really big reasons. And one is the fact that we're coming off COVID. We've been looking at screens for 2 years. So in the COVID years, we were sitting at our desktop looking at a screen. And then when we go to a meeting, we're still looking at a screen. It's just a bigger screen, and there's warm bodies around me, right? So if all we're doing is looking and reading and being spoken at, we are not absorbing, and we are gonna tune out. So in a virtual environment, how long do you think people can pay attention? Just show me some fingers. Pretend I can see them. People can pay attention. People can pay attention for 4 minutes, and every 4 minutes you have to, as I say, slap them upside the head in order to get them to pay attention. You have to engage them. You have to get them to do something physical, even if it's something as simple as typing on a keyboard. But you basically have 4 minutes. In a live meeting, how long do you think you have in today's world? 7 minutes. I can only sit and be engaged and watch things for 7 minutes. So if you are not actively figuring out how to capture my attention by switching things up, by engaging me in the action in some way, shape, or form, even if it's something just as simple, as by a show of hands, right? So whatever that might be. So it's really critical that we are trying new things and doing new things. The other thing that has changed, and I don't mean to offend anybody by saying this, but we are currently living in a it's all about me world, right? I see things through my personal rose-colored glasses, and if it's not something that I'm engaged by or that I want to hear about or that interests me, then I am tuning out and I'm becoming this lady in red, getting on my phone in the middle of the presentation, right? Because I'm bored. And I see this example, and I'm sure you guys see it in your meetings all day long. You're getting ready to have a speaker come to the stage, and it takes you 5 times of saying, ladies and gentlemen, please sit down, please take your seats, please be quiet, so that we can get started, because we are all about me, right? And it's all about that. And so since we've been sitting and not having interaction for so long, if we're not providing it, it's going to be taken either way. So the more we can think about how do I get people participating and in it, then the better off we are. So, one way to do that is just by simple interactive exercises. So things like I did. So it was like the something very simple like the thumb game. There are millions and millions of books out there. If you look like training games, there are millions of books out there that give you answers and suggestions and ideas for ways to incorporate some really, really low cost physical activities into programs that actually make a point, a tie into your learning, and actually bring it alive for people. Another way to do it is simply by setting up your room different. I went to a conference, this was pre-COVID, but I went to a conference one time where we walked in and all the chairs were piled around the outside of the room. And they said, feel free to come on in and take a seat. So you could either go and sit on the floor if you wanted, or if you wanted a seat, you just grabbed a chair and you took it wherever you wanted. So there was no rows, no aisles, not enough space for my hips because they stick out further than the chair does. It was really interesting, and it made you go, huh, there's going to be something different going on here. Also walked into a conference one time and walked into the general session, and there was no chairs at all. And so people walked in and were thinking, wow, what's going on here? What's going to be different? What are we doing? And literally they did a 5-minute general session, and then the room popped open, and there was all kinds of interactive things that gave the marketing person's speech and the finance person's speech in a game or a fun way to do it. So it was an entirely different way. So there's lots of interactive things like that you can throw in. One that we love to do is called Stump the Jump. And Stump the Jump is a very simple game. You divide the group up into teams, and each team has to come up with 3 to 5 questions that they are going to ask the group. And their job is about the content that you're talking about, and their job is to try and stump the other teams and get points based on other people not being able to answer their question. So it's a very competitive, fun way, makes them have to think about the content in order to be able to craft questions. It's competitive, so it plays to those competitive people in the group, and it costs $0, some paper and a pencil on the tables, and basically you got it. So it's a very easy way to get people engaged and to test some knowledge. It's a more interactive way than just flashing some trivia questions up on the screen. And it makes them demonstrate that they understand the content enough to actually ask a question and have the correct answer for it. So it's a much deeper and richer way of engaging people. The next thing that I'd like to share with you that's becoming really, really popular right now is learning excursions. And MPI started doing some over their Europe conference. I haven't seen any in the US yet, but basically the concept of a learning excursion is you take your group somewhere to go teach them something, right? And they learn from somebody else, and they learn in a different environment, and they learn from somebody who's doing something similar to what they're doing, but not exactly what they're doing. And I'll give you an example. Exxon, after the Valdez crisis, when they lost all of the oil into the ocean and had that huge global crisis going on, decided that they needed to figure out a better way to handle these big mistakes or crises or whatever you want to call them. And so they were like, well, how are we going to do it? And their process during that time was, it starts at the bottom, the people on the boat who know what's going on, and then it gets pushed up to the next level and pushed up until finally it's at the top of the pipeline, and somebody up at the top is making decisions, but they're not in the action, right? They don't really know what happens on the ship and where the valves are, what the problem is, and if it can be fixed, because that's not their role in the organization. So they decided, well, who else has really big public relations and public safety issues that they have to figure out at times? And they thought, well, why don't we go to the zoo and talk to the folks that take care of the lions? Because if a lion gets out of his cage, that is a huge safety issue. It's a PR nightmare, right? And there's things that have to happen as it goes. And so what they learned from that visit at the zoo was that the bigger the problem, the smaller the number of people, and it was all the people that knew what was going on. So the person that was in control was the lion cage keeper. He was the person who knew everything about the lions, their habits, their environment, and how to get them back in the cage and what needed to get done to keep them safe. And he was the only person that was allowed to talk to anybody because he had intimate knowledge of what was going on. So they changed their pipeline from being like this in the decision-making process to being like this in the decision-making process. And they learned a lot by looking at somebody in a similar vein or in a similar situation, and then got insights and things from them. So it's about taking people off site. It's about going someplace different, learning something different, talking to different people than you would normally talk to. So that's another example. And then the third example would be just using games and simulations. And that's our core specialty. It's the thing we love to do, is to hear other people's content and then build games around it. We had a medical device company came to us one year and said, hey, listen, we're getting ready to launch a couple of new devices, and there's a couple things our team needs to know. They need to know all of the data and the specs and all the things around our product. They need to understand the competitive analysis, what's happening in the competitive world. They need to understand the regulatory world and what's happening there. But we don't want to just sit and blab at them for a day and a half on here's all of this information that you need to know. So they came to us and we created this game that was loosely based off the game of life, and everybody had pieces, and they rolled dice and they went around the board, and there was all different places where they could demonstrate the knowledge or learn the knowledge that they had to do. They might pass payday and get some money. So we had 600 people in the ballroom actually playing this really cool game of life. Another thing they wanted to do at that particular meeting was they wanted the doctors to share what they see in a good salesperson. So we were like, okay, so how do we do that? So we created a show called The Dating Game. And we had 3 of the salespeople who were very gracious guinea pigs come up on stage. The doctor was the bachelor, right? And then the salespeople were trying to get a date or get an appointment with the doctor. and they had to ask questions of the doctor, and the doctor would answer, or excuse me, the doctor would ask them questions, and they had to answer, and then the doctor picked the person that he thought was the best salesperson. And so it was a really fun way to showcase what they were trying to show in a hands-on, participatory, funny way, and a whole different kind of a way than they normally do. So, Barbara, is there a question? Should I take a break right there? I only have a few more slides to show, but I can take a break here.
I have a question. This is from Mary. What is the best time of the day to build in these types of activities? So in your agenda, when do you do that? I can say Sharon, just to give a plug here, has done a couple of our Prevue summits, and she has designed business game session to teach the attendees how to do business games with their own groups. I believe we did it in the early afternoon. We've also done it as an icebreaker, but I will tell you the energy in the room, it's good to integrate it when it's going to be a slump time, because the energy just goes through the roof. People are standing up and they're laughing and they're they're following her around, and it's just so amazing to get the group energized again, because they can fall into just this lull. So that's my personal experience, but there's probably research on this too. So why don't you share what your clients do?
Yeah, and what I would, what I would say is we want to include something every 7 minutes, because that's when we lose people's attention, right? So that's not practical or reasonable or usually doable. But if we're thinking about this in terms of, all of these interactive and hands-on ways of learning are also about sharing your knowledge with other people. It's playing on that core adult learning theory of I know stuff and I want to share it, right? I want to talk and I want to give my input on what I know and blend that with what everybody else knows. So if we think about it from a networking perspective, we want to do something as early in the meeting as we possibly can to set the stage that this is going to be a meeting where we're going to talk, we're going to interact, we are going to be hands-on, and we're going to ask for your participation. And then you do something at the beginning that requires that sets the stage for it being a little bit different and gets people talking right from the beginning. Then you get the bonus of I might be sitting next to two people who I've never met, and it's 10 minutes in and I've already met people. I saw a research study one time, and I cannot find it again to save my life, but it basically said that if I am a first timer at a meeting and I can meet 10 new people and have a valid conversation, right? It doesn't have to be long or deep, but feel like I made a connection with them. If I can meet 10 new people in the first 2 hours, you've got me hooked for life. That I will continue to come back to your conference over and over and over again, because I feel like I've been included, that you did everything you could to make me feel welcome, and that I got to meet people, which is obviously when, learn, meet, we kind of go back and forth on the survey scales. But so I would say you definitely want to do something at the beginning to set that stage. And then, like Barbara said, I like to do these interactive kinds of things late in the day or whenever you're going to have a lull, right? So after lunch is a prime time, because people are, they go to lunch, they come, and you put them in a chair and you start preaching at them, and they're gonna fall asleep with that full belly that they've got. So I like to do things right after lunch. It gets them engaged and woken up and ready to go again. And then you could go back to a more traditional speaker kind of thing after that. But whenever you feel like there's a lull or you need some time in your schedule, there's lots of ways to do 10-minute things that you can fit in throughout the course of your whole entire thing too. So, but I think it's just important to do it. And that's more important than trying to figure out exactly when to do it, right? So But those are my two favorite times, the very first thing we do, whether that's at a general session or we do an educational session before we do a general education, a general session. Another thing I love to do is, I think about this all the time. We spend a lot of money on general session speakers, and we bring in these top name, really great speakers. We put them up, we wine and dine them, and they come out and they speak for 45 minutes or an hour, and they kick things off and they get people excited and motivated. And then the session ends and we say, all right, everybody go out, grab a cup of coffee and go to your next session, right? And we never even think or talk or have a conversation about what the speaker said. Was it relevant? Was it cool? Are you motivated? How are you motivated? What's it going to push you to do? If it's a motivational speaker, or if it's like a Simon Sinek or some of the trend futurists, what are we going to do with that? How are we going to use that knowledge, and how are we going to put it to play in our company? So, we love to do, we call them flash learning mobs. And so people come out of the general session and there's topics on flip charts that they have to go. They can grab a cup of coffee and some popcorn or whatever you're serving and go and join a group and have a conversation about what they just heard, and give them an hour to talk about it, because there's some speakers that, they're really good, or they're really thought-provoking, and you want an opportunity to say, man, that speaker was awesome, or man, that speaker sucked. I didn't agree with a single thing he said, right? But you want to have those conversations. So I think like after the general session is always a great time to do something interactive too, because you want to kind of capitalize on that energy and the learning that they've gotten and the thoughts that are running around their heads based on the kind of speaker that you had. Great. So what this is really all about is, kind of moving from this traditional conference education side where it's all about content, speaker talks, we listen, it's about watching, it's memorizing facts. The speaker is the only expert in the room, and many times they're way too long, even if they're only 20 minutes long, and moving to more learner-focused education where it's about solving problems, about collaborating, participating, sharing knowledge, applying knowledge. We get to be the experts and talk about what we know. It's about connecting with other people in the room that have really great experiences that want to share there. And what we find is in learner-focused education is that it's never long enough, right? So this trend towards we're going to go to short and sweet TED-style conferences or TED-style workshops or sessions is great if all you're going to do is speak at people. But if you want to do something participatory and interactive, you need more time for that, because because people get into it and they want to talk and they want to continue to share. Sometimes just setting up the game takes 15 minutes, right? So think about that in your balance of when you're thinking about how long should sessions be. It really depends on what kind of education you're providing. And then I did want to share this with you too. This is a kind of a tool we use when clients come to us and they say, we're doing a new product launch and we need to do something to get people into it. And this is kind of a visual of the broken down into 6 of the primary kinds of folks that we have in our audiences. So we have storytellers, and they're people that want to become a part of the story. They live in that realm of imagination. They like to read, they like to watch movies, they like to star in movies, they want to perform. Then we have explorers, and those people are the ones that are always out there looking for something new. They want to go and discover, they want to have a new experience, they want to uncover a different viewpoint from theirs. Then we have competitors, and those are the folks that want to win, right? They want to go out and they want to test their skill or stamina or whatever it is against the other people in the group. And then of course, we all have a class clown, right? Everybody has somebody in the organization that is all about just let's have fun, let's laugh, let's cut loose. They want to make people laugh. They like to be involved in like improv and things like that. So as we sit down to think about who our audience is, we think about, okay, if we have a group that's all engineers, then they're probably going to fall into one or two of these kind of categories, right? So engineers I think of as being, I'm going to use the word explorer because I think they're tinkerers. They want to figure out how things work. They're also creators. They want to understand the point A to B to C to D. And so those two things kind of fit that particular area. And so as I think about designing events, I think, okay, well, if I've got a room full of like third grade teachers, then which of these personas are they going to kind of fall in the most? And then how do I get them involved in something that allows them to use their unique personality in order to be able to participate in some kind of a cool and unique way and to contribute in a cool and unique way. So experiential learning is really all about going beyond testing to see if I can recall something. Recall is the bottom of the thing. I heard it and I can regurgitate it back to you. I can take a test and I can answer the question, right? So our goal is to get beyond just I can recall something to I can apply it, I can use it, I can solve problems with it, I can conceptualize new realms and new places to go. I can use it in relationship to what I'm doing with the folks around me. So it's all about applying what we're learning. And these are just some of the kind of the words we use when we think about, okay, so how are we going to bring something alive in an experiential way for folks? So there's some ways to encourage participation and encourage interaction instead of really just listening to things. This is an example of another game that we created. I just wanted to pop this in to like leave you with some food for thought. This was a board game that we created for the end of an onboarding program. And the goal was to make sure that they understood the company's core values. They were in this program for a year. They wanted to be sure they understood the core values. And so we didn't want to just ask them, what are the core values? We had to make sure that they had internalized it and got it. One of their core values was honesty. So we built in a place and being ethical, right? So we built in a place on the board where they could cheat. No one would know except us because we designed the board, and their team would know they cheated, but none of the other teams would know it. And so we sat and we watched. Did they cheat? Did they take that opportunity to get ahead in the game, even though they knew it was wrong? There was another part of their core values. It was all about constant learning and always looking for new and better and brighter solutions, right? So we had a section on the board where they could veer off and get some additional education and earn some extra points and some extra money over there. And we watched to see who valued the learning opportunity in the game. So there's really lots of ways to build games to kind of accomplish whatever kinds of things that you're really trying to do. So I'm going to stop yakking, and we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about anything that you guys might want to talk about and go to Q&A. But here's all my contact information. So like I said, if you shoot me an email, I'll send you the Learn, Feel, Do tool, and I'll also send you the presentation. So you can have that. I think, Barbara, if I'm not mistaken, the presentation will also be posted when the recording comes up, correct?
Right, people can be emailed that presentation. So
perfect.
We have almost run out of time, but I have a very important question from a very important guest. So Eisenstadt is on the call, and as many of you probably know, a real advocate for people with disabilities. So she has a question to that effect. How do you best engage people with disabilities with these exercises, both in person and digitally? So maybe you can speak to clients you've had and how you've dealt with that.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. I'm glad you're here today. I'm a big fan of yours, and I know we're both huge proponents of play and using something fun to get our message across. So I'm glad you're here today. So In terms of disabilities, I think the key thing is understanding what disabilities you have in your group before people show up and being sure to share that with your designer or whoever's helping you create it, or to think through your game or your activity and make sure that everybody can do it. Like the example that I used earlier of the jumping jacks thing. If we were going to have people do jumping jacks, we might say, all right, if you feel like stretching, you want to get up, then feel free to do jumping jacks standing up. If you would prefer to sit down and do it from your chair, feel free to sit down and do it from your chair, which includes people that might be in a wheelchair. So I think it's really understanding what the disability is, and then doing whatever you can to design the game so that there is an opportunity for them to play. So like maybe in the corporate game of life, we typically lay our board out on tables, and if the tables are too high, we can lower the tables. And I know that's very simplistic and it's probably not answering your question. I think it's really just about being aware of, one, what the disabilities are while you're designing, and two, finding out all kinds of new options, because it seems like every day I get an email on my box about some kind of a new tool for hearing impaired people or speech impaired people. So it's really understanding what the tools are out there, and then asking and designing so that they can be included in whatever it is you design.
Terrific. Do you do anything with translation? That was another question of Joan's, for people who might not be their first language.
Yes, and again, depending on what, it's hard to be specific on that, because it really depends on what the group. So if we have folks that are that English isn't their first language, we frequently have designed things in multiple languages. So like, for instance, we have a game app that's like a scavenger hunt app. We have partners in 44 countries around the world. So if we need something in Turkish or some other kind of language, then we can get our entire game built in that language. We also can have translators that do that, and we use some of in PowerPoint. When we're doing PowerPoint presentations, they're not great, but there is some translation tools built in there. So I think it's really just keeping up with technology and figuring out what it is, and then delivering for folks that are not speaking English and therefore might not understand the exact words or the context that we're speaking things in, and being there to help them with that.
Terrific. I think we will call it a wrap, Sharon. I truly appreciate the effort and attention. You're one of a kind.
Well, thank you
for that, because I've worked with you multiple times. I hope everyone will look her up and use her as a resource. And thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. Have a great rest.
Thanks for having me, Barbara. I just leave everybody with the thought. Remember, back to this, it's not going to be comfortable at first, but just try something and do one thing a little different, and see how you can work that in and start making that move to more experiential based learning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.